The workshop is called Firebase 101, Build Messaging App with Firebase. Again, it's intended to be like beginner friendly, like kind of from zero, so you don't need to understand any like Firebase concepts or have any Firebase experience. I will talk a little bit more about like what we will build, right, in detail. But I thought like messaging app would be just a good idea because we can cover a lot of different concepts there. And yeah, just a brief introduction of myself my name is Alexander. I am a GDG, so it stands for Google Developer Group lead organizer in Waterloo, and I'm also a software developer at a startup called Lemonade. And yeah, that's like briefly about me. Then just I guess before I cover the agenda or anything else, yeah, we'll be building this messaging app. So I'll just do a brief demo of the project that we will create today before I actually cover the agenda or anything else. So yeah, if everyone goes to this bit.ly/gdac firebase-1, and then there is this project link demo. Yeah, you can see that like essentially it's a group chat application, right? So this is what we'll focus on today. Um, and I have built a front-end like dummy front-end application that does not have any backend. So we will create this application backend with the help of Firebase, right? So this is kind of the goal of the workshop. So you can see like how it works, right? And essentially, again, the messages are sorted by the timestamp. Anyone can join once you sign in. Anyone can send messages there. So this is kind of an overall idea. Um, so in terms of agenda, again, it's a Firebase overview. I'll just briefly give you an introduction of what Firebase is. 5 minutes, then a project template overview. So like what we will start with, then we'll spend probably around 10 minutes setting up Firebase. Usually it's done quicker just because I want to like explain every single step to you so it's clear. And then we'll deploy the application, again, just like a single command. So every one of you will be able to have an application running and hosted on the internet. So you can share links between each other and use each other's chat applications. And again, it's very quick. You can see it's like 2 minutes. And then we'll implement Google OAuth, so authentication with Google, right? So again, Firebase has a lot of authentication methods built in, and it's very easy to set up as well. And then last but not least, we'll connect Firestore. So Firestore is essentially a Firebase database that we'll use. So this is where we'll store users' data, we'll store messages there, and also we'll set up Firestore live updates so we can achieve this functionality of um, instant updates, right? You see, whenever I send a message, you can see that it shows up right away. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure why. A brief explanation of what Firebase is just, yeah, the definition that you can find on the internet is that it is a set of backend cloud computing services and application development platforms provided by Google. It hosts databases, services, authentication, integration. So essentially, in simple words, it is a replacement of your backend, right? So I think probably the majority of you know that like mostly applications have user-facing applications. They have front end, right, which is like images, like just the actual website that the user sees, and then there is backend, right? So you can create backend, you can create your custom API that has some database and a bunch of other services, but Firebase is essentially a replacement of that backend, right? So it's a simplified version of backend. So instead of creating your own API, you can just connect your application to Firebase and then use it as your backend, right? So in a nutshell, again, Firebase is a replacement of all the backend services, and yeah, it facilitates again authentication. In terms of like benefits, I mentioned a few here. So again, it's very simple and easy to use. It's scalable because it's built on top of GCP, right? So essentially, if it's very good for startups, and actually the previous startup I worked for, we used Firebase as our backend, right? So it is used. It's not like that technology or anything. It's pretty common, and essentially, so for example, the reason why it's good for startups is because Firebase has a big free tier, so you can have like like thousands of users and it will be like free, right? But then once you hit like a decent capacity, or so for example, one day you had like 1 million users, your app will be able to scale just because again, Firebase is built on top of GCP, so all the underlying architecture is provided to you. And then since the third point is that since it is built on top of GCP, you can integrate a lot of other Google Cloud services, right? So for example, again, BigQuery, Vertex AI, all of those can be brought in like with your application, right? So this is another benefit. And then in terms of drawbacks, is just that essentially Firebase's database, so which is called Firestore, which we'll learn about today, it is a NoSQL database. So essentially, you do not normalize data there. It's stored like essentially as JSON. And so this is kind of just one drawback, right? So it does not support normalized databases. And then therefore, you cannot essentially perform like very complex queries or aggregation, right? And you just need to be mindful of that. There is another like Firebase alternative. I think it's called Supabase or something like this. Yeah. So and it does support like normalized database. So it's something to look into probably after this workshop as well. So yeah, before we get started, this was just like a brief overview. Any questions or anything you want to clarify in terms of agenda, or maybe I hope now everyone like understands where Firebase is, right? So cool. I'm assuming no questions. Then let's move forward. So I'll go back to the agenda just so we covered overview. Now let's briefly go back to this link. So again, it's the same link. So bit.ly/gdc-firebase-1. So if you want to follow along, please open this link on your computer. Just because again, it's a set of all the like a document with all the steps that will follow today. And yeah, you can see that the prerequisites, like I hope that does everyone have Node installed on their machine? Or okay, cool. Yeah, for Firebase specifically, you'll need version 18 plus. And then yeah, also please fork and clone the repo. So this is the link here. It's a public repo, so of the project that I created specifically for this workshop. So again, it's just like a dummy front-end application that just has buttons, has images, but it does not have any kind of backend, and it's only hosted locally. So while everyone goes, well, everyone is cloning, like forking and cloning the repo, just I'll show you like what the blueprint is, right? So what we will start with. So once you clone the repo, you'll have this. You'll just run npm install, right, to install all the dependencies. Once it's done, you can do Firebase run start. So essentially, this will run our application. So just to give you a brief overview, this is a front-end application built with React, right? So if you are not familiar with React, don't worry, because it's not the focus of this workshop, right? I'll walk you like step by step in terms of like what what you need to put where. So, and it's okay. And in case you don't have any React experience, but then essentially, like again, our basic application is that here's just login button. Once you click on it, like nothing happens. It's just like it redirects you to the messages screen. And here you have logout button that again just redirects you back. It does not have any kind of authentication now. And then essentially, like you can kind of send messages, right? But like once you refresh it, it's not persisted anywhere, right? So kind of there's just an array of messages that we keep track of, right? And then once you refresh the page, they get lost. But yeah, once we connect Firebase and connect Firestore, you'll have access to it there. So okay, so this is kind of our goal for this workshop. Again, we'll first of all set up Firebase authentication, like authentication with Firebase. So we'll actually be able to get all of the data from users, right, with the help of Firebase Google Auth. And then We'll also store all of the users' data, right? So once they sign up or log in for the first time, we'll store their data. And then we'll also store all of the messages that get sent, right? And also we'll host this website, right? So here you can see that I'm currently running this website on localhost 3000. But yeah, we'll our first step after we set up Firebase will be actually to deploy the app. So cool. Any questions or anything before we move on? All good? Cool. Sounds good. And then I guess let's get started then. How many people are following along just so I have an understanding? Okay, cool. Sounds good. Probably like half of you. Yeah, again, if you are stuck somewhere, just let me know. I'll do my best to help you. And yeah, and you have cloned the repo, right? Everything is set up, good to go. Cool, sounds good. Great. Now let's go back to this document, right? I hope my head does not like block anything. Okay. So the first step for us is actually to set up Firebase. Actually, let me close all the unnecessary links just so I have less stuff here. So again, I'll have like my slides. You just need to have like two things: your code lab open and also your localhost 3000 here. So it's like whatever we'll be developing here, so you can test all the changes locally. So yeah, and now the first step and the first action. So again, here we we briefly looked at the project template, and now we'll set up Firebase. So to do this, you need to go to Firebase, firebase.google.com, and I'll just switch like to this account. Once you are logged in, you just click, you probably saw I clicked this go to console. And once you do this, there's this big button called create project. And then essentially you need to call it like messaging app and then whatever, right? Here, also just to note, I hope that everyone can see it. There at the bottom, there is this project ID, right? So it's called messaging app DD283. So Firebase by default, like it will use this project ID as part of your URL of the website. You will be able to customize it afterwards, so you can purchase a domain, and then there is a very easy way to actually link your purchase domain to your Firebase project. But this is by default. The project ID is part of your URL. So for example, if you want to change it to something else, you'll say like, for example, Sheridan, right? If it's already used, if the ID is already used, it'll just say so, and you'll need to pick a different one. So yeah, once you do it, you just click continue, just keep all the defaults. Here, just use your default account. We create the project, so it'll take like probably a couple of seconds. So yeah, we are here. I think so we are done with this section. And yeah, now we are here, so we need to connect. So after this project is created, we'll need to connect our essentially code, our repository to Firebase, right? So once you're done here, now we actually need to connect Firebase to our application. So here you can see that there are a lot of different options, right? So if you're building like an iOS, Flutter, Android app, even Unity app, right? Firebase can be integrated essentially into any application you want to build. And here, again, in our case, we are building a web application. So that's why here you just select the web option, right? Once you click on it, you need to give it like a nickname. So we'll probably do something like, again, messaging app. And please do select this, click this check mark, whatever it's called. And here, yeah, you'll just keep all the defaults. Once you do it, you just click register app. So essentially, like, again, this is just a guide that Firebase gives us to set everything up, right, and how to host your project as well. It says you need to install Firebase. So I'll just stop whatever is running locally. I'll install those Firebase tools. And then the next step here, you can see that, so it's individual for everyone, right? But here you can see that Firebase gives all the configs and all the credentials. And essentially, this is how you connect your code to Firebase, right? So we'll not, sorry, we'll follow those steps like from the lab. So here you can see that I just outlined a few specific steps, right? So I said, okay, in step 2, create a new file called Firebase .js. So again, is everyone following up to this point? Okay. Under SRC, so if we go back to your project, under SRC folder, you just need to create a new JavaScript file called Firebase or Firebase config. You can call it whatever you want. I just call it Firebase. And here, just copy whatever code we have in this lab, right? So just for the future, whenever you give talks, never write your code live, because usually it ends up not being not very good. From my experience, at least, even like the most experienced Google developer experts, they, something wouldn't work, and it just like takes a lot of time. So I'll just walk you through like those code snippets, right? And yeah, essentially what we did is we copied like kind of the same thing that Firebase gave us, but you can see that Firebase has those credentials. We do not put them in our code. I will explain a little bit, I'll explain the reason why. So here, like once you do it, again, in step 2, create a new file called Firebase JavaScript under SRC folder, export the services to be able to use them in the app later. So essentially, what is happening here, we have an object here called Firebase config, and it has all the information, right? API key, auth domain, project ID, all the credentials, all the passwords or API keys that Firebase needs to authenticate your project. And then here, there is this line that initializes the app, right? And then we export a couple of services. One, we call it OAuth. So it's an authentication service. Sorry, is everyone able to see this? Because I'm not entirely sure if it's too small or. Sure. Yeah, can we zoom in probably over here? Just thinking, I probably want to. Maybe this one will be a little bit better as well. Cool. Cool. Is everything good? Okay. Yeah, let me continue. Again, here we just create a couple of services called auth. So it's a constant called auth, and essentially it is an authentication service that we'll use later. And also we create a database service, which we call DB. And again, all of those functions are provided, as you can see here, from Firebase, right? So this is like how we create those services, right? Then, so again, once you do it, now I just want to explain why we didn't copy what Firebase gave us, but we copied like what the code that I have in the lab is, so like again, rule number 1 for all the developers is do not commit the secrets, do not commit any passwords, any API keys, so any sensitive data to in your repo, right? The reason is if your repo becomes public, then someone can find that password and then maliciously use whatever your credentials, right? So for example, if you provide your Firebase credentials in this application, then if you make your project public, someone will be able to get those credentials and you all use up all your Firebase credits, right? And then you'll need to pay for your Firebase afterwards, right? Or something like this. Or yeah, so this is just one example. And essentially to avoid using credentials in your application, there are like you use environment files, right? So essentially there is a file called here. You can see there is an example file .env.example, right? Can everyone see it? Yeah. So let me delete this one. So essentially, usually like in good projects, usually those files are provided. What it is, those are just environment variables that you need to set up whenever you run the project, right? So here you just copy it. So do not like edit this file, but just like copy this file and paste it in the same folder and name it .env. So remove that example and just make it .env. And essentially what you will do here, is, again, it's individual for everyone, is that you go and here copy just this Firebase config and that Firebase gives us, and we will put all of those credentials in here, right? So we say, you can see API key, we put it under React App API key, right? So, so you use your credentials specifically. So I take this here, then project ID similarly. So yeah, I might take, and yeah, sender ID, then yeah, just make sure to copy everything correctly because something might fail afterwards if you don't. So yeah, do not leave quotes. So you do not need quotes. It just needs to be a plain value, right? So, and essentially once you're done, you'll have something like this in your .env file. Is everyone following, or I need to clarify something? If you have any questions, just again, feel free to ask. Is it clear why we're using .env file? Credentials again, yeah. The goal of .env file is just to store all your secrets or API keys, all passwords, right? So this way you do not commit your credentials in your code, right? And then also you can see that, I'm not entirely sure if you can see like there, but if you take a look, it's actually like orangey here, like because of my ID settings. The reason is that you do not commit this file, right? So you need to include this .env file in your git ignore. So this way, again, env file is not committed and no one can see it. It's only you that can see and edit this file, right? So, okay. And the way we use those credentials is here. I say, okay, so do not commit the secrets, create a .env file in the project root folder and put your secrets there. So, and add .env to your get ignore file so it doesn't, so this is what I'm reading here, so it doesn't get committed. Then the next is that each variable must start with React app. So to use this variable, so again, it's probably you noticed that like every single environment variable here starts with React app. It's just like the way how React works. To use environment variables in your React application, it just needs to start with React app, and then whatever the name of um, your secret is, and then the way you use those secrets, as you can see in React at least, is you say process.env and dot whatever the secret name is, right? So this is essentially how you use it. So again, in a nutshell, this is what environment variables are, right? And what environment file is, right? So, and then you can create a new file code. Okay, I just, yeah, usually again, it's a good pattern whenever you create like your application, right? Or you're developing something, you want to make sure, especially if you create a project from scratch, you want to make sure there is a .env.example file, which is essentially a template for all of the secrets you need to set up, right? So it's, as you could see here, I had .env.example, and here I had all of the names of all the environment variables you needed to create, right? So this is like a brief overview of it. So yeah, once we set up an environment variable here. So now we can go back to the setup, right? So we are done with this step. Before I move on to the third step of the Firebase setup, any questions? Again, I'm happy to help to clarify anything. Do not be like, do not feel worried or anything. So any so in Firebase, we'll essentially, Firebase has like different SDKs. So it has like that we'll download in the next step, and essentially we'll use React code to use Firebase, if that makes sense. Can you say that again? Yeah, front end, and then we essentially connect our front end with the Firebase, right? So the way you connect it is, yeah, you do not, essentially you manage all of your backend in this Firebase console, right? So here, as you can see, but the way you actually interact with it is, yeah, we'll use just plain JavaScript to write like different services and managers. So I'll show you later. But yeah, essentially all of the code that we are writing, it is on the front end, right? So uh, I will cover a little bit about like security, and so it can be dangerous kind of, right? So you need to be very mindful as to what you write on the front end, and I'll explain later like how you can how Firebase overcomes it, right, and how you make it secure. So yeah, but for now, essentially like this step, what it does, we connected our Firebase project that we created to our React application. Yeah, so we do not connect. You can use Firebase and Node as well, but specifically for this, since we are building like a client-facing application, we'll just use like we are connecting our front end to Firebase. Yeah, so we are not writing any Node here. Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. It's a very good one. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, yeah. So again, you have your up to this point, like again, what we created right now, we created Firebase JS file under SRC, and then that env file that has all of the credentials there. So yeah, does it make sense? Cool. And then yeah, in that env, just use all those values, and then I guess it's a good idea also to like commit it, so you can say create Firebase config, right? So cool. The next step is we just need to install Firebase CLI, right? So we are using a npm. So essentially, again, what this step does, it's related to your question. Since we are using React and it uses npm as its package manager, we just use this Firebase CLI, right, to install all of the Firebase tools. So again, Firebase provides different functions and already a bunch of code that we can use, right? And essentially use Firebase functionalities in our application. And as part of those SDKs or libraries or whatever, right? So yeah, and essentially what this does, it installs all of those functions that we'll use afterwards, right? To store, to connect our React app to Firestore and to authentications also. Yeah. Cool. And Connor, sorry, is it recorded or no? I'm not. Okay, cool. Sounds good. I think like afterwards, like if you want to revisit some aspects, it's also good. Cool. Yeah, once it's done, you just need to log in your Firebase to your Firebase account, right? So from your command line. So it's taken a little while on my end, but let's just wait a little bit. So cool. Yeah, once you do it here, okay. I'm not sure if if a lot of like if you can see this error that I got right now, but it's just like something useful to know, I guess. I'm not sure how I can zoom in like on the terminal, but here you can see that Firebase CLI 13.6 is incompatible with Node 1620. Please upgrade Node.js to version 18 and more, right? So the reason why I got this here is because on my machine, I have a Node version 16 installed as like my default version. So I just need, so you can use NVM. It's like a special tool where you can switch like different node versions. Yeah, so you can use a command called nvm use and then 18. And once I do this, I should be able to log in. And then you can see that I'm already logged in with this account, but I can actually like do a Firebase logout, so I can walk you through like the steps. So once you do a Firebase login, you just yeah, go with the default, just hit enter. Well, then you get redirected here. You select whatever Google account you want. Like not whatever Google account you want, Google account that you use to create your Firebase project. Okay, it is very important because otherwise you will not be able to set anything. So here you just click continue, you click allow, and once you just should see this login successful message. Yeah, and then here you can see logged in as this email. So yeah, after you do this here, okay, it's we are here. Then the next step is to actually initialize our Firebase project. So you just use this command, and you select an option called hosting, configure files for Firebase hosting, and optionally set up GitHub. So once you execute Firebase init command, you can just use up and down arrows, and then to select an option, hit space, right? And then enter, right? Okay, I will stop here. Do you need any help? Anyone needs any help? Whoever is following? This part? Okay, let me exit. So here again, you did this command, right? You ran this Firebase login. So is everyone logged in? Everything good? Okay. You're showing an error. What kind of error is this? Okay, that is an interesting. Maybe it can be something related to Node or npm. Let me take a look. Give me a second. I just want to check one thing. So here, actually, you could see that Firebase CLI. I had this right? I had a similar issue. Okay, or more than. Okay, it should be good, but it is. What kind of error did you get again? Yeah, it's definitely something that you wrong. Okay, at least you have one. I'm not sure if your printer has cool. Okay, cool. Anyways, so yeah, once you log in, you just go and execute this Firebase init command. Yeah, so it's the second one, and then you just select again it's essentially fourth option, hosting configure files for Firebase hosting, and then you just click space. So this way, I'm not sure you can see that I selected this option, and then hit enter, right? So yep, and then once you do it, there are a few like questions that it will ask you, and I provided all the answers in here, so you can see for step 4, use these guidelines when initializing your Firebase project, Firebase init. So again, we selected this hosting option, right? But then then it asks us different questions, right? So it says, do you want a web framework? So here the default is no, so you can just say N, so no. Then this one is very important. Again, I'm very, I'm not sure how I can zoom in, so it's like you can see something. But yeah. So here it says, what do you want to use as your public directory? So by default, it's public, but in React, whenever you build a project, it puts all the build files into a project called, into a folder called build, and that's what we need, right? So you just specify like build here. So again, I provided here. So what do you want to use as your public directory? Specify build, right? So this question. Okay, so let's just again, if you want to replicate, I think maybe the best idea will be, I think those instructions are pretty detailed. So even if you are like stuck with the installation or something. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just using a different Firebase project, not the right one. So yeah. Okay, so once you do this, you should have something like this, right? And just so this is again Firebase setup in a nutshell. So you have just 4 steps, and yeah, afterwards you have this deploy website piece. So again, this Firebase deploy command, it actually like deploys your. So once you make any changes to your code, you can build the project. So npm run build, and then run another command Firebase deploy. So for example, here I can show you, like if we go and make any change, like for example here in the login page, I'm saying like I have updated something, right? So I save it. If I run it locally, so npm run start, you'll see that, or you will not see. It's loading. It's loading. Yeah. Okay. Cool. You can see that I made this change. And here, like again, to deploy this change, what you do is you run npm run build, and then the second command is you do. So the first command, this npm run build, it actually builds the React application, and so it can be served. And the second command is Firebase deploy that you run here, and essentially it deploys the app again, right? So we will probably need to wait a little bit. So you see, it's your project URL, and then you can see that I deployed this change, right? So essentially, this is how you deploy the project. Yeah, you should see the changes locally, and then yeah. So, and then just again, you can see that I created those scripts. I ran 2 commands, right? And instead of running 2 commands all the time, you can just create a new npm script. I'm not sure if anyone like knows. Do you know what npm scripts are or how you create them? Okay, I see a couple of people know, but essentially the way you do. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. Okay. Yeah, essentially the way you create like custom scripts or combine different commands, right? Right now, for example, to deploy a website, I needed to run 2 commands, right? npm run build, and the second command was Firebase deploy. So instead of running 2 commands all the time, I can just create my custom command or custom script. So in React, you can do it. So there is a package JSON file, and under package JSON file, there is a scripts scripts section where you can add this line where you say deploy npm run build and Firebase deploy. So essentially what it does, it combines those 2 commands, and then when you run npm run deploy, essentially it will run those 2 commands for you, right? So this is just a nice way to combine those. Cool. Crazy. Okay. I think we are a little bit over time, but generally, let me then quickly walk through those. I guess if you can keep up, let's do it. But if you're a little bit confused or anything, that you can just observe and then try it at home. But here now we essentially are done with the Firebase setup, and we are done with the deployment. Now I'll focus on setting up authentication. So to do it, you actually, there is an authentication section in Firebase, right? So here, this is project overview page, but under build section, there is authentication. And here you just click get started. And once you do it, there is like a sign-in method and then Google. And you just need to enable it there. And here you just use whatever the default email is. And then you click save. So essentially what it does, it adds, so Firebase adds Google as a third-party authenticator to your Firebase project. And yeah, here you should see the status enabled. And what it means that now we can use Google Auth in our project. So then, so here we are done with this. So these 3 steps are done. Now the question is, how do we actually make our app use this authentication, right? So how do we connect those buttons? Because again, right now I'm running it localhost, right? Right now it just redirects, it changes the screens. We do not see any pop-ups. We do not see anything, right? So how do we create it? How do we implement it, right? So to do this, you can create like managers, I call them. You can call them controllers, whatever. So essentially, we'll need to create a new class called Auth Manager. And we put it under SRC. And then we should create another folder called Managers, right? And here we create, sorry, like a file called Auth Manager. And there, essentially, we just copy and paste this code, like whatever is here. And I'll just give you a brief overview of what this code is. So here you can see that, so again, it is a class, right? I'm assuming like people know what classes are. And we have 2 methods here. The first one is login. The second one is logout. So the login method, essentially, we just get the Google Auth provider. And you can see here in the first line, we get Google Auth provider. It is given to us from Firebase, right? And essentially, we just create this provider. And then with the help of this provider, we call another method that Firebase gives us called sign in with pop-up. And then there we just provide our auth service that we created in Firebase, config in the previous steps, and provider as well. And then we just get the user data from that authentication flow. So essentially, again, what this method does, it will show this pop-up right to the user. They authenticate, and then once it's done, we'll just get the user data, so result user, and then just log it in the console. And then for the logout method, it's just a simple sign out method that, again, is provided to us from Firebase. And yeah, essentially, that's basically what this class is all about. And now we just need to connect our buttons, right? Yeah. I'll just walk through this. If you're stuck at some point, you can stop, and then at the end, I really doubt we'll have time, but I guess you can either take this home, like this lab home. It's most probably it's related to credentials or something. Like whenever you logged in, you just need to make sure that you select the right account. Yeah, so it's most probably related to this. So yeah, no worries. So, and then yeah, the next essentially one of the last steps for authentication is just again to update our buttons to actually like do something, right? Because again, right now, although I created this manager, like the buttons still do not do anything, right? The reason why they do not do anything because we didn't connect those buttons yet, right? So so if you go here and under our pages, we have login page. And here you can see that I have the login with Google button. And you can see that on click, so on click, it just uses this handle login method. So we just need to update this handle login method to actually to use our auth manager's login method, right? So here we just do auth manager login. And after this, so now when I click, you can see that we get this pop-up. And I also will open the console. And here you can see that once I logged in, I can see all of my data here, and we'll use it later, like to store all the users' information. So like display name, phone number, photo URL, and stuff like this. So in your application, again, you can use like different information there. And similarly, like for logout button, we just need to, let me close those. Yeah, you just need, and under messages page, you just need to update the logout functionality here. Cool, so just import that. And yeah, so essentially now when I click log out, I'm also logged out. When I go back in, I'm logged in again, right? And you can see all the information here. So this is like in a nutshell what it is all about, right? So essentially, again, we created this, what we did right now in a summary, we created this auth manager. It has two functions, log in, log out. We use Firebase tools, Firebase functions, right, to actually sign in with Google. And then once we sign in, Firebase just returns this user data to us, and we just log it here in the console. And yeah, that's basically like in a nutshell what we did right now. So here we can just do another commit saying like implement login, log out. Cool. And one important thing is here, like for example, so you can see that right now I'm logged in, right? But I can actually go and delete. So on this URL, I can delete messages and just go to the home page, and I'm still like here, right? So I'm logged in and I'm on the login page, right? So it shouldn't happen in the application, right? Whenever the user is logged in, they should not have access to the login page because they're already logged in. So this is what is happening. And to fix this issue, we need to implement a like auth state handler. So there is a special method in Firebase called on auth state changed. So essentially, this method listens for authentication state changes. So whenever the user is logged in, yeah, they like Firebase detects it, and then you can see here we say whenever Firebase state changes, here we say if the user is defined, right? So if the user is not null, it means they are logged in. So we navigate them to the messages page. If they're not logged in, so else, we navigate them to the home page, which is our login page. So, and essentially, like again, to implement this component, we need to do auth state handler under, so we need to create a new component called this state handler. We create this, and then the way we use it, we go to app.js, and before routes, we use this auth state handler method here, component here. And we also need to update a few other things. So in login page, we need now, since we let this auth state handler navigate the users to the right pages, right? So you can see here that now this method and this component, they will monitor the user login state. And if they're logged in, we'll again navigate them to the messages page. If they're not logged in, we'll navigate them to the home page. And essentially, we need to update then the login, the way we handle the login with Google, right? So we do not need this line anymore, right? Because we have this auth state handler, and we don't need this also. Yeah, essentially, and then here similarly, like again, since auth state handler uses the like navigates the users to the right pages, we also need to update our messages page logout button, logout method, and we just need to delete this navigate line as well. So again, what happens right now is you see that I'm logged in, and if I try to go back to the home page, I'm redirected back, right? So this is essentially what happens. So you can see that like there is this short couple of seconds where you see the home page, but then yeah, we get redirected back to the messages page. So yeah, cool. Time. How are we? I know. Do we have like 20 minutes or no? Or what was the duration? Yeah, let's probably, can we finish this and then we can probably do something? Okay, I'll be quick, okay? Then yeah, I guess for workshops, the best scenario is when you actually show everything and then let people go and try it on their own. If they have any questions, I would just, so this is probably what I should do for the like next time. But yeah. Then again, we are done with all the authentication now. Now we are going with the Firestore. So again, Firestore is the database. So similarly, you go to Firebase. Here you click Firestore. Then you go to create database. We need to create a database that, so it just, again, all the default options are fine, except for this one. You should use test mode here, right? Just so you can actually use your application for now. It's related to Firestore rules, but it's like security related things, but we'll cover them later. So essentially what it does, you have this panel afterwards. So this is your database. This is where your data will be stored. And essentially what we'll do right now, so we created the database, right? And the next step is we need to create a user manager. So it's, again, similar to our auth manager, but we have a user manager. So here, let me just quickly implement auth state handler. And then here we just create another manager called user manager. So again, this user manager will do everything user related. So it will either, so we have two methods here. We have get and create user methods. So create method, essentially what it does, again, it uses the Firebase methods, this doc method, just like maybe I guess some terminology like generally. The way collection is essentially a table name if you know like normalized databases. So for example, in our case, we'll have users collection, and then users collection will store user documents, right? So each record in Firebase is called a document. Each table or set of records, it is called collection, right? So, sorry? Yeah. And then again, create method, what it does, it creates a document, right? We point our database here, then collection name is specified here, right? So users collection. And then we provide the user ID. So essentially, create method accepts the user object. And there we create this document and then we set it. And then we also have the get method, which is get by ID. So essentially, we again get the document reference, and then we use Firebase method called get document, which actually gets the user record, so the user document for us, and then it checks, okay, and it returns a document snapshot. If the document snapshot exists, it means that Firebase found a record, and then we can return the data of that record. If the snapshot wasn't found, we just return null. It means that the nothing was found, and we just return null, right? So this was briefly about like this manager. Then the next one is we actually need to use this now, right? So we are going back to this auth state handler. So if the user, Yeah, sounds good. So again, two like brief explanation. There are two methods, right? Create and get. They essentially creates a Firebase document, and then the second line, it means so set document is a special. All of those methods like doc, so you can see here, right? Those imports, you can see that doc, get doc, set doc. Those are Firebase methods. So all of this is provided by Firebase, and then here essentially we just say await set doc, and then yeah, we provided there. And then similarly for get by ID is so document reference is we create a document reference, right, with this Firebase method called doc, and then the next line is we get the document from Firebase, and then if so this get doc method, it returns a record snapshot, a document snapshot. If the snapshot exists, then we Firebase found a record. If it doesn't exist, we just return null. It means Firebase the record doesn't exist in Firebase. So this is like a brief overview, and essentially what we want to do now is in this auth state handler, we want to update it so that if the user, so you can see if the user is logged in, right? We say we get the user's UID. So again, we use Firebase auth, right? And Firebase gives us all the data, including user ID and stuff. So we get this information. So UID, we get it from Firebase, right? From Firebase Google Auth. And then we say, okay, UID is this. And then we say, okay, now let's just get the user's record. We say user manager get, and then we provide UID. And we say, if the user doesn't exist in our Firebase Firestore, then we say create a new record. So again, what does it mean? If the Firebase, what it means, what does it mean if user is not in our Firestore? It means that the user is a new one, right? So we haven't registered them yet. So we need to create a new user record for them in Firestore. And if they do exist, we just ignore this step and we just redirect them to the messages page, right? So essentially, so I've written this code now. So again, here I refresh this page. There are no records. Okay, there is already a record because I logged in, right? But essentially, what happens is like once you log in for the first time, a new record gets created, and what we fetch there, right? We say, okay, store ID, store name, which is we get it again from Firebase. We say logged in user, give me display name, and then image, use logged in user photo URL, right? And you probably saw it's here, right? This is what Firebase auth gives us. And here you can see display name is here, and photo URL is here. And also, yeah, again, your application can use other data there as well. Cool. Then, so this one, essentially, we just app users. So this is how you sign up new users, right? Essentially. And then what do we do next? Here, so we are done with this. We are done with this. So this is essentially how you get and store records, right? Now we need to store the messages, right? So similarly, we create the, okay, I have 10 minutes. We create the message manager. So message manager JS. And yeah, I put all the code there. So again, it's similar approach as in the user manager. We have, again, collection name, which is called managers. And then we have two methods now as well, but a little bit different one. So create method again, where we essentially accept the message object, right? And then we say, we also can, with the help of Firebase, right? So this auth, it is from, it's the auth service that we got from Firebase. And we say, okay, give me the current user that's logged in. and we say, okay, we create a new object, new JSON, essentially. Okay, a new object, JavaScript object that will store in Firestore, right? So we say text is whatever message is provided. Then we can get display name from the user. We can get image also from the user. We can get author ID also from the user. And timestamp is server timestamp. This method is again provided to us from Firestore, right? And then again, we use another Firebase method called addDoc, where we just store this new message, right? And then for get all, we need get all messages to get all of the messages to display them, right? So to do this again, to get all the messages, there is another method in Firebase called query, and we get a collection, right? So we provide database, and we say, okay, our collection, which is messages in our case, and then a query, which is order by, well, order by timestamp and ascending order, and essentially like what it will return a set of messages that are sorted. So the earliest messages are at the bottom, right? And the oldest messages are on top, right? So yeah, cool. This is just a brief overview of this method. I know that you might have a lot of questions in terms of like what those things do, but yeah, let's just what you need to understand is message manager is a class that has two methods called create and get all. Get all will use them to display messages on the front end, and then create is the method that we'll use when to send messages, right? So essentially, whenever we do something like this, we'll call create method, and then we'll use get all to display those messages, right? Because right now, when I refresh the page, nothing is stored. So, and again, here right now, when I refresh, nothing is happening here. We just have users collection. But now, once we use this message manager, we'll also see another collection called messages. So, okay, under message card, we just need to do a few updates. So message card here, and then here as well. We essentially, what we do, this message card, we just say, okay, for the avatar, use message author image. And then for display name, also just use, so again, if the logged in user is the author of the message, then just display me. If it's coming from somewhere else, display their display name. So, and then now we actually need to use the methods of the message manager. So if I go to messages page, here we say that, so we need to update the way we send messages, right? So here I update those two, and I update this. So essentially, again, this function is called, so when the send button is clicked, we call this function, and this function calls our message manager, which essentially creates a new record in Firestore with this input text. And then we need to also yeah, we just updated a few avatar, and we updated the display name, so it's here. The reason why we did it just so we can display, like here you can see that every message, right? Here we have name, here we have image, right? So we just updated our code so it displays message like name, like the author and the avatar, right? So this is what the changes were. Yeah. And then here we also need to update this method as well. So in a nutshell, again, in the setup, right? So I'm not sure if how many of you are familiar with React, but use effect, essentially what it does, when it's a special hook that, yeah, essentially whenever a page loads, right, we say, okay, call this setup message. And then and in this setup, so essentially when the component is loaded, we call the setup method. And then we say, okay, on the setup, get all of the messages that we have, right? And then display them. So, and this is essentially like briefly how it works. And now you can see that we have a blank screen, right? Actually, I forgot to update this thing as well. So here quickly. So yeah, I have a blank screen for now. The reason is because there are no message records. So once I send something, it's still not displayed. Although, why? So I'll show you this. So you can see we do have a message record, right? So message was created. And then here I can send a second message, right? So second, it's still not displayed, but we do have a record here, right? So you can see we do have two records here. The reason why it's not displayed is because we need to refresh a page to display something. So, and here, for example, if I send another, so third message, fourth message, fifth message, it's still, I need to refresh the page and only then you can see the messages. So this is why we are coming to the final thing, which I'll try to do very quickly, is we'll need to set up Firestore live. So we will need to listen for Firestore live updates. So there is a concept in Firebase called like snapshot listeners or something like this, that essentially listens to any changes in the Firestore, right? So essentially what we need to do in our application, so it works like this, right? So we want to make it so it works like this, right? Whenever I send a message, it gets displayed right away. So we don't want to refresh a page to display a message, right? Right now, again, this is how it works. To do this, we need to set up this, again, snapshot listener. Essentially, conceptually, what it is, we'll need to create another method that will say, okay, whenever you detect any changes in Firestore, just notify our front end so it updates the messages it displays, right? So this is like conceptually what it is. And here, essentially what we need to do is we'll just need to add another method in our message manager called get all observable, right? So get all messages and observe them, right? So yeah, I wish I had more time to explain this, but again, like in a nutshell, Firebase gives us this method called onSnapshot, right? And here essentially we just provide a query that we want to monitor, right? So we say, okay, in this collection, in this database, for this collection name, which is in our case messages, and we created this query, right? So we sort by, like again, timestamp ascending. So by the timestamp, so the latest messages are displayed at the bottom. And we say, okay, on snapshot, so again, this method Firebase, the Firebase gives us, we give it this query, and we say, whenever, like monitor this query, if anything that like any changes occur in the database that match this query, notify our, like, do this, right? So execute this method. So, and essentially what it does, like again, quickly, it just, it updates the front end, so it displays the latest messages, right? So here we pass the setter, and the setter is called with a new set of messages, right? So I hope at least it's somewhat clear. You know, we are 1 minute over time, but almost done. And essentially, we just also need to update this in messages page. in messages page here, we just need to update this use effect, or I guess setup method. And once I upload it, so you can see now it works, right? So ABC, the latest message. Cool. And essentially once I deploy it, everyone, so now I can just like, again, quickly run this command, npm run deploy, right, that we created previously. And now if everyone goes to that URL that is there, you'll be able to also send messages, right? And they will be displayed right away. One last thing that I didn't have time to cover is this one. So, so limiting the records is right now, the way it works, our front end gets all of the records that are in the database, right? So right now we don't have a lot of records. We have only like what, 10, 15. But once the users get to like even 100 messages, if you want to display 100 messages on the front end will get overwhelmed and it will slow down your device. You do not want to do this. This is a bad user experience. So what you want to do is you want to limit the number of messages you display, right? So this is the last section here. What I say is we want to display we want to limit only to like less 30 messages or something, right? And this way, again, you still can see the latest messages, right? But at least the client stores only 30 messages. They do not the front end does not store all of the messages that are available in database. It stores only 30, right? Does it make sense overall? Cool. Okay, I'm sorry about being overtime, but I appreciate your patience. I learned my lesson that I definitely need to go over all the content first and then let people play around with it, see if you have any problems or questions. I guess a lesson for the future, but I appreciate your attention.